What's up YouTube, it's I with the boat, and today we have a core expansion tier list. Before we get into the tier list, the objective of this video is to provide a measurement for cards in the core expansion, rating what cards are being used based on popularity, and placing them in tiers. This video is valuable to all TEPPEN players because it was recently announced that the core expansion would be a forever staple set for competitive TEPPEN players, and this video will help you understand what you have in your collection. And just a reminder, in case you don't know, this is the set we're talking about. TEPPEN Core Card Pack. For the format for this video, we'll be going through each color. Cards on the left side of a card are better than that card, except for in situations where a card is niche in what decks it could be played in, but still need a tier. Another thing about this video is that any cards that were placed in the D tier, we will actually not go over them, and they are placed very randomly in that slot. Let's get started with red. Starting with the S tier, we have Fate Defying Ryu. This is a high value unit in both unit based decks and action based decks because it is a 3/6 agility unit for only 6 cost, and you'll see a lot of players play this in their red deck for when they have so much advantage when your opponent is at 0 MP. That's kind of like a safe spot, so they usually just drop this when the opponent has 0 MP and then just go to town. In addition, this will be played in action based decks because you can scale the ability of Fate Defying Ryu, making it into an unstoppable threat that most players cannot deal with, and that will also take the game. For the A tier, we have Neon Tiger. This is a high value 3 cost unit. Now, not a lot of players play this card because red decks these days, they more are based on synergy. However, for core standards, this card is still a high value unit because it is still a 3 MP 110 that has a cool ability that goes off when it deals damage. Next up, we have the B tier, and starting off we have Dread King Rathalos. This is one of the coolest cards in TEPPEN because it costs a lot and it will deal 5 damage every time it deals damage to the opponent. This could be a threat where if your opponent doesn't stop it, they lose their whole board and they have to deal with it. Unfortunately, as time has passed, it has been a lot easier to deal with Dread King Rathalos. In addition, the MP cost is so high that once this card is dealt with, you are generally losing the game. So most players do not play this card because if you spend that 8 MP and it gets shut down, you're probably going to lose that game. But it is still a B tier card because it can get nutty when it just works. Behind that, we have 2 burn spells. We have Sneak Attack, Headshot. These burn spells are good, but they're only played in one deck, which is, Face Burn, Dungeon. Next up, we have the line of on-play burn cards from the core expansion, and these cards don't really see a whole lot more play nowadays, but they are still valuable cards in the sense that they have a lot of face value for what they cost. So they're not played, but they're still good. After that, we have Leon Kennedy. Leon Kennedy can be used in some interesting ways, especially in humans. I've seen Wajil, which is a very strong Ryu player, top Ryu player, use Leon S. Kennedy in conjunction with Princess Fuse to deal even more damage. If you don't follow Wajil, please follow him on Twitter at TEPPENW. After that, we have Guy. This is more of a high value unit. Although it is not also seeing play, this is still a unit that you could play in your deck and it will at least provide a useful ability, which is blocking, and then having the rush ability poses a threat to your opponent. Then after that, we have Exploding Barrel. This card is just another burn card. However, most players don't really play it unless they feel the need to have it in their deck. So it's really just a spicy card for burn players to option into. In C tier, we are having Axel. This is another 3 MP unit that has decent value that could trade with opponent units. However, this card has not a lot of synergy with the current decks in TEPPEN. Then after that, we have Colonel. Colonel is not a card that gets played at all, but there are some meme decks out there that make this card worth playing. After that, we have Lady, which is not that great of a card, but is still decent value for a 7-drop. Firelord's Judgment is another C tier card. This card can deal a lot of damage to the opponent board. However, in recent metas, a lot of players are not opting to play this card because if you use it on hard play, it is way too much to pay 5 mana for its ability. And then even on response, you're hoping that your opponent will play a card, have the right situation on the board to get full value, and there's just not many cases like that. After that, we have the attack buff True Faith. This card can buff some units. However, most decks that play dual color don't really option into True Faith unless it's like their last choice. But because it's dual color, they tend to go to colors that are green and purple, have better buffs. But True Faith is still a card you want to keep in your collection because it could potentially be used in a deck that requires buffs. Next up, we have Sean. This card, I don't think that it's a great card, but I do think it is a C tier card because of Wajil playing it in one season and showing that this card could beat a lot of top players. I do think that the 2/6 stats could matter in some rare situations. Next up, we have green, and in S tier for green we have Disarm. Disarm is a counter card to a lot of decks, and it's really nice to have this staple of a card in the TEPPEN Core expansion because you will need this in almost every green deck that you play. What this card does is it strips enemy units all of their abilities and makes them take up a slot. Unfortunately for green, they end up usually having to kill those units anyways, so it's not exactly like a kill card, but for 2 MP and sealing an enemy unit, it's pretty much the most you can ask for green players. It would be nice if they could just destroy cards. After that, we have Evasive Action. There are many scenarios where cards in TEPPEN will have their attack or life changed. So having some evasive actions in your deck, usually as a 1 or 2 of, generally 1, can reset a enemy card or a friendly card to help you establish your gameplay. As a 2 MP card, this is a great counter as well as a support card to help you within your games, especially when using this with 2 free MP. Next up, we have Wall Jump. This is a card that can give shield to any friendly unit. It does not discriminate by color, and for that reason, any decks that are using green, whether it's a dual color or mono green, this will allow your units to protect from damage from an incoming trade, or it will protect you from damage spells. For 1 MP, that is a lot of value. Next up, we have Heavenly Kicks Chun-Li. I don't think this card will ever age with time. It is still a 5 MP unit 2/6 with agility and combo that a lot of players are utilizing in their green decks, because once you have your opponent in a situation where they have 0 MP and you just drop Heavenly Kicks Chun, poses a lot of value just being on board for cheap. Next up, we have the A tier, and starting with A tier we have CC Yaku. This card can be placed onto the field and any unit in front of it will become sealed. This is a great card in the core expansion pack because it provides you the ability to seal any unit in TEPPEN, but your opponent cannot respond to it. So for example, like we had S tier, Disarm. Disarm can be negated, but there's literally no counter to CC Yaku. CC Yaku, once you have it in your hand and you can see the opponent's unit, you just place CC Yaku and it's sealed. Behind that we have Felicia. Felicia is a card where if you just have an empty board, you can pay 6 and then have 3 2/5s on the board. Right now we are seeing Felicia being used in mono green decks because of its high value in early game pressure and it being able to dodge a lot of cards that look at mana costs. Behind that we have the 3 MP 1/7 Feline. This is a great MP boosting unit. Most decks these days won't really use MP boosters, but if they do, this will be the first one to option in for. Next up in B tier, we have starting with Iris. This card did get nerfed, and we are seeing less play of this card. in green decks. Generally what we are seeing is there have been better units that outpace the value of Iris. So for that reason, players are just playing out the units that they would want instead of just playing Iris to just gain MP. Behind that, we have Beast Cannon, which is just another 2 MP plus 2 attack card. This can be used for aggressive decks. After that, we have Soul Offering. This card deserves to be in B tier because although you don't really see it played a whole lot, having a unit that gets +7/+7 in stats for 6 MP, not a lot of players can deal with that, but the top players will be able to deal with it. It's still a huge threat that you don't really want to see. After that, we have Dreams Restoration. It will bounce one of your cards and then give you 7 life. What this card can be used for is with Yawn or to counter cards like Brainwash, and it will heal you life as well. Next up, starting with C tier, we have Leader Summons. This allows you to summon a full board for only 3 MP, allowing you to either block in situations or provide pressure or gain fodder. For 3 MP, this is a very good value because you're essentially paying 1 MP for 3 units each. Behind that, we have Dust Cloud, and Dust Cloud can be used with any hero to block damage. If we ever go into a meta where face burn is very prevalent, then having 1 or 2 hero shields can allow you to protect against a 5 damage card, or even with Denjin it could be like infinity damage to the face. After that, we have the 6 MP Crisp Redfield. There are better Crisp Redfields these days, but this is still a decent unit that you can play with green, but if you ever play this card, it's only going to ever be like a 1x. Any more than that will be a little bit inconsistent because it relies on you having a board, and Teppen right now does not allow you to have boards. Behind that, we have Emergency Strike. This card used to be used a lot in the day. We don't really see it out anymore, and the meta has shifted to where you won't really see many uses of Emergency Strike, but this is a card that can deal damage to an opponent's unit. Depending on how your deck plays, it can be useful, but maybe you just want to play Hakai. And behind that, we have Roaring Typhoon. This card did get buffed, and the image here in the tier list does not reflect it, but Roaring Typhoon is now a 2 MP card with the same ability, allowing you to destroy flight units. Now, there are a lot of flight units these days. If there ever were a time where they come back, you would want this in your deck. Behind that, we have Unwavering Faith. This card is more of a combo card, allows you to grab green units in your deck for cheaper than they were. However, you really only want to play this in high cost decks, because if you just get a CC Yaku, for example, for 4 MP and reduce it by 2, then you really didn't gain much, and you also gave your opponent resources for just trying to pull that combo. Next up, we have purple, and S tier we have Brainwash. Brainwash is a card that I'm not very fond of because I feel like there are very rare situations where you want to use this card, but I have seen a lot of top players use this card to its fullest potential, but there are games where you won't be able to use it at all, or it comes back and bites you in the butt. Generally, this is an S tier card for the core expansion because of how powerful it can be. Having this card in your deck means that you have the potential to just win the game with it. There are also bad drawbacks if you just get countered. Behind that, we have Devil Hunter Dante. This is a card that will single-handedly win you games as long as you can play an action card, because it turns into Devil Trigger Dante, which is a 4/7 agility flight. Starting in A tier, we have Foresight. This is a card that allows you to draw more cards in your deck. With memory-based decks, this card allows you to fetch more options, not brick, and also build up that memory count. For 1 MP, this is a valuable card in purple. Next up, we have Unforeseen Interference. This card allows you to negate any action card that's 3 or less for 3 MP. After that, we have Hookshot, which just gives flight to a friendly unit. This allows you to deal direct damage. Behind that, we have Ibuki. Ibuki allows you to resonate and agility for high stats. This card isn't really being used in a lot of decks, but it is still a strong card in core. After that, we have Jester. which is another card that I enjoy because you can use it to resonate and gain more units. If your opponent doesn't deal with the Jester, you just get more units. Generally, when playing Jester, you will more times than not get more value than what you paid for. Starting in B tier, we have Crystal Hunter. This is a card that can, for 2 MP, halt a unit for 5 seconds. This card allows you to reset the opponent's attack line, which is a very powerful mechanic, and Crystal Hunter is the best card in Teppen that allows you to do it for cheap and efficiently. Behind that we have Darkhold. It costs 1 more MP, but it allows for a longer halt time. Behind that we have Hidden Intent. This is a card that allows you to cut half your life to negate any action card that is 5 or less. This card is very useful, however only very few heroes can be played with this card because of the cost being so high, cutting half your life. This card is generally used with Dante or stall decks that can guarantee not getting hit in the face. After that we have Hashenko, which is a card that can scale, getting +2/+2 for every action that you play after you summon this card. And ending with B tier we have Devil Trigger. Devil Trigger is a card that gives a friendly purple unit flight and agility. This card can be blown out because if you lose the unit, you didn't really get a whole lot. There aren't really a whole lot of situations where using this card will net you a lot of value in today's meta because of most of the purple units being nerfed. Starting in C tier, we have D. This is a very high value unit in core expansion, and we actually saw this being used a lot in Haunted by Memories. I do believe after this video we are heading into another action meta, so I do see the potential in this card being played again. This card, because it has Veil, it allows you to not have this unit be targeted, force your opponent to get bricked, and then you can deal direct damage to them over and over again until they lose. For a 3 mana 2/5, this is a very good unit. After that we have Greed. This card is another unit generator just like Jester. But the problem with this card is the units don't have flight, so they don't really have a whole lot of value after they are summoned. After that we have Secret Libido Morgan. This card can infinitely tap down an enemy unit, but for the current meta, the Morgan will probably die before it actually gets a whole lot of value. After that we have Boldface Lie. This is a card that allows you to negate an enemy action card and put it back into their hand, making it also a cheaper cost. So if you have 2 negates, you can counter a higher cost card that you normally wouldn't be able to, because Boldface Lie does reduce the action cost. However, I do not think that that combo is very practical and will generally leave you at a deficit. Next we have Agony. This is a card that can halt any 5 cost or higher unit for 5 seconds for only 1 MP. And then after that we have Pride, which is a unit that can scale HP based on Resonate. We don't see this being played in a whole lot of decks, but if there ever were a deck that needed a unit that gained more HP, Pride would be in it. Last but not least, we have Black for the tier list, and in S tier we have Selfish Predation. This card is a 3x in every single black deck that is currently being played. The reason why this card is so good is because Teppen is a game where you are playing a game of attrition. Last but not least, we have the black tier list, and starting in S tier we have Selfish Predation. This is a card that is played as a 3x in every black deck, and this card is important because it essentially makes you into a 51 health character. In addition, it helps you in the war of attrition, because a lot of Teppen gameplay is to trade resources, but self-predation allows you to ignore the trades of resources and destroy your own card and then gain 7 health, which is a lot of health if you're gonna ask me. Starting with A tier we have Mad Massacre. I believe Mad Massacre to be a great card because it does a similar effect to Selfish Predation, except it deals damage instead. We don't see this card being used these days, but all it really takes is just for more cards that synergize with Mad Massacre, and you're off to the races. Behind that we have Obliterate, which is a 6 cost destroy any unit card. This will forever be a good card to play because it doesn't really discriminate, allows you to destroy a card, and the cost is not half bad. After that we have Heartless Experiment. This card allows you to cut 3 life for 1 MP, and it gives +2 attack to a friendly unit. This is a good MP Affliction card that allows you to buff your units and is one of the cards that make black have the better attack buff cards. So I highly recommend keeping this card in your collection because it is used in a lot of dual color decks if you are an aggro player. Following that is Psycho Power, which generally 2 MP buffs don't give defense or health to the unit, but this is the strongest 2 MP card that does it because it gives +2 attack, +2 MP, and there's not a whole lot of conditions, just cutting your life. Behind that we have Zombie. Zombie is a very crazy card because it is one of those cards that when it dies it gives you 1 MP back. And what's even crazier about this card is it comes back into your deck as a 2 MP 5/2 stat card, which is really good for putting pressure and blocking. And then you also get another 1 MP back. So generally this card gives so much value, and I think that this card is underestimated sometimes if players do not see its value. Last in the A tier we have Tyrant. This is a 4/1 unit for 4 MP. It has a cool ability where if it dies, it'll destroy all 1 attack units. But what's really nice about this card is that when it comes back as a 2 MP 4/9 unit, which is something you generally have to pay 5 or 6 MP for. So the fact that you get this unit as a 4/1 and then it becomes back stronger as a 2 cost is very valuable. Starting in B tier we have Summon Minions. This is a great card because it can take any colored unit from your deck and place it onto the field. So you will see aggro decks use this card to play whenever your opponent ever plays a card that would destroy one of your units. You could just use this in response and then replace it. Behind that we have Destructive Instinct. This is a 5 MP unit that also allows you to destroy any unit. However, you will be taking damage of that unit based on their attack, and this is also a card that could be negated by purple because it fits into that threshold where 5 MP or less cards can be negated by purple. Behind that we have Dynamo. I don't generally use this card, but a lot of Japanese players are liking this card, placing them into their deck and creating trades. The stipulation with this card for having a 4 MP 4/9 unit is that you can't really play any units after Dynamo, otherwise Dynamo destroys itself. Behind that we have False Throne. This card is very annoying because it fuels a lot of reanimate decks, placing cards from your graveyard back into the field, and False Throne allows you to take the highest cost card in your deck and throw it into the discard pile. So it really accelerates those types of decks, and there have been a lot of broken combos with False Throne. Next up we have Possessing Malice. This card in my opinion has a text error because the way it reads is not the way it plays. So by the way it reads, you would think that there's only 1 copy of a card being interacted with. The weird thing about this card, Possessing Malice, is that it creates a copy of whatever you targeted into the owner's discard pile. So for reanimate decks, this allows you to create 2 copies of a legendary card, for example. There are practical uses with Possessing Malice defensively and offensively because you can target any unit on the field and reset it. The drawback is that you take life damage equal to the MP cost of that unit. Behind that we have William Birkin. This card isn't being used in many decks these days, but it is still a very strong 3 MP 3/3 unit that allows you to buff other cards on the field. Next up we have 4 MP 3/7 Bile. You don't really see this card used a whole lot, but for a 4 MP unit it is decent value in trade. There are just better options, but for core standards this is really strong. And behind that we have Blood Destiny. We don't see this being used in any decks now, but it has been used in the past and can be used as a way to end games. So it will stay in the tier list as a B tier card because it's not always going to be used, but it is a card that always has a future potential. And starting with C tier we have Crow. Crow is black's 3 MP flyer. It does cost life, but for some decks it can be used in Spike Launch, Spike Dive Bomb, and really that's just about it. And behind that we have Gathered Souls. This card allows you to pull a activated revenge card from your deck into your EX pocket. This means that the card needs to have at least died once. It is a good card because for 2 MP getting a card back specifically can help you accelerate your gameplay. After that, we have Just Desserts. This allows you to kill one of your own units and destroy a random enemy unit. We don't really see these card played a whole lot because it's slow and the meta's gotten faster, but it is a good card. Once the meta slows down a bit, I could see this card coming back as a 1x. After that, we have Spreading Infection. I believe that the meta is still too fast for this card, and there are just better cards and strategies to play than playing a Spreading Infection for 5. For your MP, you can start an engine that's even different just by playing other units that give more value than Spreading Infection. And last but not least, we have Wheelgator, which is a 4 MP 210. This card does not see play, but like a lot of cards being rated in these tier lists, it is still a very high value unit that, for its MP costs, its stats are not bad. And that's it for the core expansion tier list. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below in the video. And if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe to the channel. If you're looking for more content for Teppen, please do follow me on Twitter at @IowaTheBoat. I did just have a tweet recently where I posted a lot of my deck list into a thread on my Twitter, so be on the lookout for that post. Thank you for watching and have a better 2021.